Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. So welcome to Professional and Digital Writing at Work, a conversation about careers in writing. My name is Dr. Roger Chow. So I'm here with Dr. Jim Nugent and Dr. Felicita Carmichael. We are with the Department of Writing and Rhetoric. And this is just an event that we've been trying to put on throughout the department, just trying to introduce our students and other students at Oakland University about, the various careers that you can explore that are writing intensive and a chance for you to sort of put some of your writing skills to work. So in a moment, what I want to do is I want to introduce our panelists. And then we'll go through a series of writing related questions, and each panelist will get a chance to answer. And for participants, as the panel is going on, please feel free to type your questions into the chat. So if you hear any of the panelists bring up something that you want to hear about a little bit more, you can type in the chat. So your questions will go directly to Dr. Nugent, who is acting as the host. And then in the last 15 minutes of today's session, so around 4:45, what we'll do is we'll go through some of those questions and we'll ask them to the panelists. Okay, so great. So first, I want to introduce Rachel Spangler. So Rachel Spangler is the Goldie, Ippy, and Alice B. award-winning author of 18 women-loving women romance novels, including the Lambda finalists, Heart of the Game, Perfect Pairing, Close to Home, and In Development. They live with their wife and son in Western New York and always make time for a good romance, whether reading it, writing it, or living it. If you want to learn more about Rachel's work, you can visit her at her website, rachelspangler.com, or find her on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Patreon. Another panelist joining us today is Heather Pettis. Heather Pettis is an avid fan of sci-fi and fantasy with a passion for the written word. She cultivated that passion into a career in editing. While she started out in the automotive industry as a technical editor, she's since launched her own company primarily focused on fiction, TTRPG supplements, and more. Heather enjoys helping authors bring their stories to life and leave their readers with a lasting impression. When she isn't editing, she is traveling, gardening, and gaming with her husband. If you want to learn more about Heather, you can visit www.bookrealmrevisions.com or follow Book Realm Revisions on Instagram or Heather R Edits on Twitter. And then finally, we have RJ. RJ May is a web developer and product owner at American Expedition Vehicles. He is an alumni of the Oakland University Department of Writing and Rhetoric. RJ is also an organizer for the WordCamp Detroit Tech Conference. He's a frequent judge for high school and college ethics competitions. And when he's not behind a keyboard, RJ is a drummer in a local band. He's a reader and a cat aficionado. Great. So I want to first welcome our panelists. Thank you for joining us today. And our first question is, why did you choose a writing-focused major as an undergraduate? Right. So what led you to pick a major that you did? And so I guess we can start with Rachel and then just go in the order of the introduction. So Rachel, Heather, and then RJ.
I was really afraid this was coming to me first. And I knew this question was coming. I didn't have a writing focused major as an undergrad. And I didn't tell you that because I thought maybe you would uninvite me. I actually have an undergraduate degree in political science. Though I was consistently given awards and accolades for being a good writer in political science. So maybe that should have told me something very early on. I did pick up an English minor at Illinois State University. So I came out of a really strong writing program as a minor. And I worked actually as an undergraduate teaching assistant in their comp department. So I was around a lot of writing. I just didn't get the major. And given the work that I've had to do on craft, as my career has taken off, perhaps I would have done better to do that.
What made you want to? Oh, sorry. What made you want to pick English as a minor?
Yeah, so I love to read. I love stories. I was a storyteller long before I was a writer, and that need to communicate those stories was, something that really drew me to books. And then from the love of books, I think a lot of people who love books start to pick them up and say, how does this work? What makes this, set of words on a page spark emotion, spark change. It's an incredible vehicle for exploring humanity. And so that's where it started, with the love of books, and then the craft came later.
Thank you. Heather?
I am also an alumni of Oakland University. Fortunately for me, I started off with an English degree, and I took so many classes my first semester, I was drowning in just the amount of reading. I discovered that Old English makes my brain hurt so much. But thankfully, during my sophomore year, the writing program at Oakland University was born. And I like to talk to my teachers a lot. And I was talking to Professor Armstrong after class one day, and he says, I have some people you need to meet. So he took me to meet Mr. Marshall Kitchens and his right-hand man. And that's how I graduated with a writing degree. I was one of the first graduates of the writing program. And I chose writing specifically because I am a lifelong avid reader. Harry Potter, with all of its flaws now, as stuff has come to light as the years have gone by, I still love the fiction itself, even if the creator has disappointed many of her fans. I love Anne McCafferty and Nancy Drew and all of that. So I wanted to actually work in book publishing. But after I graduated, I was trying to save up money to go to New York. And then when I finally had enough money to pursue a publishing certificate, I got scared. So I can talk about that a little bit later and let RJ finish, but that's
Please
why
do.
I took writing.
Great, thank you.
I kind of stumbled my way into a writing and rhetoric degree. When I first started at Oakland, I thought I was going to go to med school, and I was a non-traditional student. I went back to college at 28, so I was a bit older, and I felt like I'd somehow gotten this idea in my head that if I had a non-typical major for a pre-med student, it would help increase my chances of getting in. And then I had this like really egotistical idea that I could be like Anthony Bourdain for medicine and like write this really cool, intense stuff. Eventually, I kind of gave up on all that and just finished out with the writing degree. But since then, I've been very, very happy that I did. So,
very cool. Thank you. Next question. Could the panelists talk a little bit about your career paths and then how writing shaped that career path? I guess we'll start with Rachel again.
So I wrote my first book when I was an undergraduate, perhaps another sign that I should have been an English major. And it was mostly just for entertainment. Like I said, I like stories. There wasn't a ton of queer fiction available in Central Illinois at that point in time. And in lieu of being able to find the stories that I wanted to read, I began to write them. I wrote them largely in the back of classes I didn't want to be taking. I know that I took a geology lab at some point, but I don't remember anything about it because I was just in the back scribbling my own stories. And actually, I have to call out Dr. Ostergaard here because she was over at our house one night. She's one of my wife's classmates and found one of the books. It wasn't a book at that point, sitting out, and picked it up and was like, you should send this in. And I was like, no, that's a bad idea. But she just kept reading and reading and reading it. And I was like, wow, like an actual English PhD student is reading my book right now. And so after several weeks of that, I decided to finish it and turn it in. And much to my surprise, it got accepted. So at that point, I was in graduate school, and I wrote the second one in graduate school, perhaps another sign that I shouldn't have been spending the money on that particular degree in student affairs. But the second book got picked up, and I had 2 books out in the first year after graduation. And it was just kind of eye-opening for me that this was a thing now. It wasn't just something I was doing as a hobby. It was something I could do, as a life, as a livelihood. Not a big one at first, but it from there, I realized that I had catching up to do. I had learning to do. If I wanted to make this my career, it was time to get serious about that. And then I spent the next few years becoming really a student of craft and plugging along. I tried to put out at least a book a year, and that's part of my genre. You have to stay relevant. You can't let those things, they'll forget. There's a lot more queer stuff coming out right now, and they'll forget about you if you don't keep your name in front of them. So I was really learning on the job in a lot of ways, attending professional conferences, really dissecting who is doing well in the field, and trying to break down at a fundamental level what makes this work. This being the craft of storytelling, of writing novels, constructing a story, constructing a narrative, constructing characters. And 18 books in, I'm still doing that. Every book, the best compliment anyone ever gives me is that each book is, they can see something better in each book, because that's definitely what I'm trying to do with my career. I don't want to get stagnant. I'm always trying to look at what works and figure out how to write better.
Thank you. Heather?
Writing is probably one of the most useful skills that you can use in the businesses. I graduated with a writing major and a business minor, and I was taking the professions. So I was planning on writing for business. I was lucky enough because I graduated in 2012 at the very end, and this was we were just starting to come out of the depression that happened in 2008. Jobs were still a little scarce. I was lucky enough to get an internship in the automotive industry. And I went from getting paid $7.45 an hour to 16, which was insane. And I was still living at home. So I'm just like, hoard it all. I want to go to New York. I want to do this. A couple months in, I got promoted to out of the internship and into the department that I was accepted in. And I was answering emails. I was the dealer face. So I was talking directly to dealers who are for the most part male. I would get a variety of reactions when I answered the phone. Some would be super happy that they got to talk to a woman. And especially since on the phone, I sound like a 16-year-old, really kind of made some of their days. Others got really pissed. They didn't believe in my abilities. They didn't believe in my intelligence, and they would demand to speak to my manager. So it was always an interesting kind of course to go through, but that was my job. I still considered going to New York, but I got really scared because my family and friends told me, oh, you'll go through college and you'll read so much that you'll hate book reading. I managed to keep my love for that. I managed to make it through, still continue reading about 100 to 200 books a year for fun. And then I got out of college and I was at okay, what do I do now? My whole life has been planned out until this point. And now it's up to me to take what I've learned and go with it. And I just felt like I had been dropped out of an airplane without a parachute and was expected to make one in midair. So I decided to pick what was comfortable, and I stayed comfortable. I continued learning how to write, and my creative soul was slowly dying. It wasn't until I was talking to one of my friends at the library that I used to work at that one of the others is like, wait, what do you do? And I said, I'm now a technical editor. I do repair manuals. I work on car repairs. I have learned more about repairing cars and doing weird stuff with cars than I probably ever would have in any other profession. I work directly with the engineers. And she said, wait, I have a friend who I beta read for, and she needs a new editor. She needs a redone. She got a couple bad reviews on Goodreads, and she needs, someone to do it. So why don't you talk to her? She's willing to pay you. Have a conversation, see if this is what you want to do. That was the best 2 months since I had graduated from college, I think. I loved taking apart stories. And I realized this is what I can do. I can look at someone else's work and I can figure out what's not working. and I can give them ideas, and I can tell them like, this character doesn't seem wrong. Oh, this character's facing this way. So how can the person behind her tell how perfect her makeup is? You know, just continuity issues. And we started a partnership, and I decided, okay, I'm going to go talk to my tax accountant family member and find out, how do I start a business? How do I protect myself to make sure that I don't get in trouble, that I can protect my author and all of that. So writing has clearly, it's 100% shaped my life.
Great.
Business is doing better.
You pick-
Oh, someone hasn't muted. Okay. I was like,
We're all good. We're all good.
okay. And this is what I want to do. I'm no longer scared of being in the publishing industry. I have taken a lot of continuing education, developmental editing classes through the memberships that I have. I've gone to professional conferences. I have met a wonderful community of other authors and editors, and it's the best.
Great. Thank you. And RJ.
Well, after I decided on the writing and rhetoric degree, I got a job at a marketing agency. They hired me as a project manager, even though I'd never done that role before or had any training in it, and I'm still not quite sure how I landed in there. But what quickly happened was I was taking Dr. Nugent's writing for
They might have what I'm looking for.
writing for the web class. So what happened was I learned the basics of HTML and CSS, you know, writing web pages from that. So I kept getting more and more involved in programming. So I started writing and building WordPress sites and things like that. And after I graduated, I needed money. So I got a job at a marketing agency, at a different marketing agency, just programming all day. And that sucked really bad. I hated it. That was miserable work. Eventually, though, I found a company, American Expedition Vehicles, that's where I'm at now, who was looking for someone to kind of manage their website, as well as handle other technical projects. So I got in there, and I still code somewhat, but most of my work now is managing outside vendors. So I've got about 8 projects I'm working on right now with about 6 different vendors. So I'm literally just writing emails all day where I'm explaining as concisely as possible, very, very detailed technical information. So that's where my writing really, really comes out the most. I also fairly often have to put together technical documentation for how to do something with one of our web products. So for example, we have a website, you can order a whole car from us, and I show people how to do that and things like that. So technical documentation has been a big part of it. And then also just general rhetoric, you know, I am still part of the marketing department. So I do get to help out with coming up with why should you buy our really expensive Jeep or something like that. So.
Wow, who knew you could order a whole car off the internet? That just reminds me of those old commercials would be like, would you download a car? And it looks like we are so close to that. We're almost there. So
I totally would download a car, by the way.
Yeah, I would too. Great, thank you for sharing all of that. So our next question is, so we are the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, and we tell our students that rhetoric means persuasion. But sometimes that's a very general answer, and we're never sure if students know what that means. So hopefully you guys can maybe help us solidify that a little bit, which is can you give the audience an example of how rhetoric shows up in the writing that you currently do at work?
Back to me.
Yeah.
So I'm actually married to a rhetorician. So we have these conversations a lot at my house. And one of the things that her colleagues say that, I mean, God bless them, it makes me want to poke them in the eye with a screwdriver, is that creative writing is not rhetorical. And am I allowed to cuss on this? Because that's bullshit. I write genre fiction. It is absolutely rhetorical. I have an audience, I have a purpose, and I have a forum. And if I want to keep my audience, I better be consistent with my purpose and respect the rules of my forum. If I try to sell you a romance novel where we both end up dead at the end, no one will ever buy a book from me again. I've broken my promise. A genre is a promise to your reader that you are going to take on certain themes and you are going to deliver them what they're looking for when they pick up a book about that theme. And in romance, we're looking at the transformative power of love. It took some time, but I've gotten to know my audience very well. I interact with them on social media. I interact with them at conferences. I see their reviews all over Goodreads and Amazon, and sometimes delivered personally to my email. They let me know very much when I have disappointed them. That audience has expectations, and that audience pays my bills. So it's very important to me that I remain aware of them. That doesn't mean that I always give them what they want when they want it, because I mean, they would love to see my characters continue to pick out China patterns and adopt a dog, and it will go on forever and ever. So we always have, it's a negotiation, but to pretend like they're not there and that they're not looking for something specific is a career killer. And so I very much see my work as rhetorically situated within that triangle, always balancing the expectations, the message that I'm trying to get out, and respecting that this genre matters to a great many people because of what it offers them in their life. I don't want to disrespect that. I would not be in the field that I was in if I didn't share that. But yeah, absolutely, always balancing. The rhetorical triangle is, I don't think I could be successful in my field without a basic understanding of those principles.
Awesome. Thank you. Heather?
Rhetoric is so based, it's such a part of what I do that I forget, the triangle. It's just a part of what I do, because like working in the corporate world, I always have to know exactly who I'm talking to. And especially if I'm not speaking, like not typing, emailing, speaking to someone that I haven't actually talked to before, I have to do that highest level of respect and knowing whether or not I can throw in humor or who my audience is. And part of what I do is I talk to legal, I talk to compliance, I talk to dealerships, I talk to technical field people, I talk to all sorts of people, and engineers, which are their whole different box of communication, and every single one of them is different. So I have to understand that triangle. It's embedded in what I do, and I have to be able to communicate effectively. I have to persuade the technicians to read this technical service bulletin in full and not skim it, because if they miss one step, they could do catastrophic, awful things to the car. That will cause repeat repairs and an unhappy customer, and that customer may never come back to us. So you have to keep them engaged. I have to be able to get responses from legal. I have to make sure that I am a pleasant enough person to respond to, that they want to do it and not put me at the bottom of their list and possibly push back my deadlines, which are very short. They're like a week sometimes. So I need to, like, and within the age of current email where we're all flooded, because I can't go to someone's desk and have a 5-minute conversation right now, I have to make sure that they see my email and they want to talk to me. And then on the other hand, through my website communication, there's a whole world of people who have been at home and are like, I can write this passion project. They need to come to my website, and I need to be persuasive enough that they want to actually work with me, that they actually want to submit my contact form and email me and take the time to speak to me and see if I am the right editor for them. So I have to do it in 2 different ways, but yet knowing my audience, knowing who I want to talk to, and creating the perfect message for them is what I do day in and day out.
Thank you. And yeah, RJ, if you could share a little bit about how rhetoric shows up in the writing that you do at work.
Well, when I first started, especially, I have no automotive background prior to this. I'm not what anybody would call a car guy. My understanding is you put gas in it and it goes. And that was about the limit of what I knew. I had to quickly assert some level of competency with my colleagues talking about things. So a lot of my time was spent writing, but also listening and understanding what resonates with them. So now I communicate a lot more with metaphors and things like that that are clearer to the people I'm talking to. So they're on the opposite end of it. And I'm not trying to choose my words carefully here, but these are people who don't have a background in communication. So when I get an email from them, it's kind of hard to understand sometimes, and they're not always very good at articulating their points very clearly. So when I'm reading their content, what I'm trying to do is figure out what matters most to them, and oftentimes they just want to get their job done and go home. So today I had to explain to somebody how our credit card fraud detection software works on our website. And I explained, well, imagine someone trying to break into your house and blah, 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 and all the different security guards and things like that that go into place. And once he understood it, that was good. But then I explained, we do this so that we don't get these big chargebacks around a bunch of money and all that. And then that kind of connected the whole thing into a level of understanding. So Rhetoric's been just a huge part of everything I do there. The other thing is too, I then have to take my language and change it a bit when I'm asking my boss for money for projects, because I'm doing that a lot. So I had to explain to him, this is the time we're going to save. This is the other money we're going to save by spending it here. And a lot of what I'm doing are sort of small sales pitches in order to accomplish some other goal that I have.
Great, thank you. So our next question, right, with social media being so prominent nowadays, what role, if any, does social media play either in the professional writing that you do or the writing that you do in your personal lives?
Yeah, it's everything for me. Like I said, sometimes it's a year. It's at the very least 6 months between books for me. And I'm trying to keep my name out there. So direct communication with my readers is so important. And social media gives me the platform to do that, to always be aware of my brand, and to, this last book came out in February, and I've heard from 3 or 4 people in the last week that this is the first book of mine that they've read. And that's social media. That's, they didn't stumble into a bookstore during a pandemic and pick this up. They found this online. So I actually, I'm about as old as Facebook. So I was in the first group of people, way back, kids, long time ago, when Facebook, you had to have a .edu address to get on. I was in college, and so I had a .edu, and it was just me and all my friends hanging out on Facebook. And then all of a sudden they opened it up to the world. And then suddenly, like, my readers started finding me on there, and I realized this is a tool. So I was one of the first people in my field to have that because I already had it. But then all of a sudden we got in this weird space where, like, a reader would comment on something and then my grandpa would respond to it. And I was like, this has to stop right now. One time a woman was like, when are you going to move to Australia since you sell so well down here? And my grandfather was like, my grandchildren are all Americans. And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. This has to stop right now. So I had to do some really serious work around cultivating different spaces. So on Facebook, everybody gets everything because, like, my grandparents are on there, but also there's women that are of a certain generation that matches my grandparents, and they love that stuff. They love it. Pictures of my kid, like my grandparents, like, they're all the things all the time. But then on Twitter, I behave differently than I behave on Instagram. So all of you go to all of those things right now, okay? Twitter at Rachel Spangler, and Instagram at author Rachel Spangler. I'm also on Patreon, but that costs money and you're in college, so I understand. But I'm cultivating, that's a new platform for me. I'm cultivating relationships with people who are willing to pay for that access, people who want a bazillion behind the scenes stories. They want to watch videos of me getting drunk and talking about books. Like, they will pay for these things that are all new. And so I'm constantly testing the waters on different platforms, trying to figure out what people want in different spaces and how to convey that to them in a way that is genuine and consistent with the message that I want my overarching career to reach. I also have a Tumblr, which I don't advertise because I'm really way too old to have a Tumblr. I think once you're 30, they try and kick you off of that site, and I've crossed that threshold. But that is a space where I get to indulge in really geeky fandom. And I get to play just as Rachel Spangler, the person who's a geek. And that doesn't get listed on my website. I think I do some of my best work there, if I'm being honest, but that is not, it's not promotion. It's not for public consumption in a branded sense, which I think it's also important for creatives to have those kind of spaces too, where they're not selling anything. But once you start advertising these things to readers, to your audience, then you have to be extremely deliberate about what you put out there. It's not just, despite the fact that you're going to go to my Twitter now and see that my Alexa had to remind me to get dressed today. That's all part of it, right? I reveal different things on different platforms because I'm aware of where I can get away with certain things. So yeah, I actually worked for 5 years as the social media director for Bywater Books as well, which is my small publishing house. And I've recently left that realm. It's exhausting. Social media, it's constant, and different platforms will let you schedule posts, but then sometimes they downgrade it. And I had to learn a lot, study a lot of metrics. If it comes from a third-party site, will it make it in people's feeds? There's just so much there, and you have to post every day on multiple platforms. So after about 5 years of that, I've moved more into the editing side. I'm now the senior romance editor for Bywater Books. So I've sort of stayed in that management, but I've taken a step back. I'm not the public face on that. I'm working sort of on the back end of the books now.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Heather?
Yeah, and then they changed the algorithm on you, Rachel. That's the best part.
All the time. No one's worse about it than Amazon.
Yeah, it does not matter. So I will say, thankfully, that I don't have to do social media for the automotive industry, because there is a whole team for that, like a whole separate team. There's like 10 people for that, for reasons. And social media teams are one of those things that are, they've been around for a couple of years now, but now those teams are expanding just because of how much millennials and Gen Z and everyone coming up is just using social media. So for me, I'm actually going underneath a brand transformation. I'm getting business coaching from a fellow editor who is super successful, and I want the life that she has. So I'm paying her to give me her secrets. That's been, so actually one of my pieces of homework that I have right now is to actually go through authors that I would like to attract to my brand and doing a deep dive into their social media to see the hashtags that they use. When do they post? How often do they post? Do they have color preferences? Are there certain filters that they use all the time? Like the whole everything. So branding for me is one of those things that I'm now doing a huge amount of research into to figure out how do I cultivate myself to appeal to my audience the most. So I completely get that. But yeah, social media for any creative is anyone who's going to be a business owner or part of a business or any of that. It's as Rachel said, you give out pieces of yourself. You have a different tone for each platform that you use. And you have to know what you can and can get away with, because if you do something that steps one toe out of line, the internet will jump on you, as we are all very much aware. And then you have to do some reflection and figure out, okay, how can I make this better? Like, not only do I do a public apology, but how do I correct this for the future period? But also, how do I make sure that I don't possibly overstep my boundaries again? and which can cause you to be safe. And the other thing is making sure that you are safe. Certain people aren't able to distinguish between social media and the real you, and they will start to think that they have more of you than they actually do. And I've read stories about authors who had to put in restraining orders because their readership thought that, they connected all of the dots. They got them on all the platforms, they found them on all the platforms, and they showed up at their house. And that is not necessarily something that you want to do. So making sure that you don't make everything public for everyone to see is also one of the most important things about social media you have to keep in mind. And I will give that to RJ to finish up.
So I don't do much with AEV social media at this point anymore. There was a while I was running their web forum, but we actually have a full-time social media person just running that. But as myself personally, I use social media a lot for more professional development type stuff. So I needed a recommendation for a new hosting platform for our website. So I went onto Facebook and talked with other web developers on some forums that I'm in about what they recommend and what works well for them. And that's been really helpful for me. When I was organizing conferences back when Inside was still a thing, we use a lot of social media for promoting them. And in particular, I focused a lot on getting sponsorships. So I definitely use a lot of social media there for trying to hustle some extra cash so we could make this whole thing work. It was a nonprofit conference. So that's most where I'm spending my time on social media. Aside from that, it's promoting my Dungeons and Dragons games. So that's about it for me.
Nice. Great. All right. So before I ask this question, just want to remind the audience to pose any questions you have for the panelists into the chat. They're going to go directly to Dr. Nugent. As I stated earlier, 15 minutes before this panel ends, we'll go through some of those questions. So yeah, any questions you have maybe about their careers, any questions you have related to writing, whatever you're curious about, please type those in the chat and we'll be sure to get to those.
You all are awesome. I love every one of you right now.
That's awesome.
My phone is just like blowing up over here and I'm seeing your name. So thank you.
That's awesome. Great. So I guess before we move into student questions, what advice, panelists, do you have for students who are either currently a professional and digital writing major or students who are contemplating going into professional and digital writing?
Yeah, I would just say that all of life is communication, right? If you have anything inside of you that you want to share with the world at all, you're going to have to communicate it in some way. And I think that's really human, right? To want to be seen and want to be heard. And there's a million different ways that you can choose to do that. Some of them might just be based on a career. Some of them might be based on a passion. Some of them might be based on, artistic aspirations. But whatever you do, you're going to have to communicate something. So you might as well be good at it. If something is this essential to your success, learn how to do it well.
I was going to say for business and digital, learn as much about both as you can. If you look at any job description, one of the top 3 required wanted skills is written and oral communication. Excellent. So learn how to be able to write your thoughts down, make sure they're clear, concise, that someone else can read it, have someone else read it, have a trusted partner who can double check and make sure that your brain didn't fix the mistake where you misspelled a word or you made a homophone, which, just to clarify, is when 2 words sound alike and are spelled alike, but they mean very different things. So many emails that I've received. Oh, autocorrect is not your friend. Autocorrect is not your friend. And I think most of us has definitely realized that, but autocorrect's not your friend. So learn to double check everything that you do, because writing and being able to talk to people is one of the things that will get you where you need to go. If you need to be able to if you need to be able to negotiate a salary increase, or you want more paid vacation or something like that, any benefits, or talk about professional development, you need to be able to communicate your thoughts effectively through email, because you want to have a written record of that you had this conversation, and orally with your boss, with potential bosses. You need to be able to do both very effectively. And I have to say that I was so sad that I wasn't able to take more of the digital writing classes when I was in the professional writing track, because I was so interested in so many. And 10 years later, almost 10 years, Tumblr's trying to kick me off too, Rachel. I crossed the 30 threshold. My cousins are graduating high school and college. I feel old, but yet not at the same time. Being able to, learning about both is so important, and digital writing is right there with top things now, being able to do it.
Thank you.
The first thing I tell anybody in any creative field is your portfolio is like just as important as your actual degree, in my experience. You need to be able to show the things that you've made in a quick and concise way. I had people applying for an internship with me a couple of years ago. One of them was working on a PhD in computer science, but could not show me anything that he had made. So I ended up hiring a high schooler who said, I made that website. Great, I need someone who makes websites. That's what I needed. So having a portfolio is essential. To me, a writer or an artist or designer without a portfolio is like a doctor without a stethoscope or whatever. It's just such an important part, vital part of that lifestyle. So I always harp on everybody to have some way of expressing that. You can crank out a WordPress site in a couple hours if you need to, or whatever. You can do it for free, but it's such an essential part of being in this business.
Great, thank you, RJ. Awesome. So we are right on time to move towards student questions. And so if in the audience, if you still have questions while we're going through this, please type them in. Please continue putting questions in. But here's two interrelated questions for the panelists. So feel free to address them together or address them separately. So here they are. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced with writing, and how did you overcome them? Or when starting out as a writer, did you ever have complications with getting rid of bad habits that negatively affected your writing? And if so, how did you overcome those bad habits? So both questions are related to challenges that you faced while you were developing as a writer, and how you went about overcoming those challenges. I guess for this one, how about we switch the order? We serpentine a little bit. So we'll start with AJ, or I'm sorry, RJ. We'll start with RJ, and then we'll go work our way backwards to Rachel.
I have a tendency to get very wordy, I guess. I'll say in 8 paragraphs what could have been said in 2 sentences. And for email in particular, that can be a problem. I've definitely sent messages out and got a response back from whoever I was talking to, where it was very clear they missed some of the things I was asking them about, just because no one wants to read a wall of text in an email anymore. So I actually pause before I send something and sort of squint at it and see if I can spot what the most important things are, like not even looking at the text, but just visually. So almost everything I send now has bulleted lists and headings of some form. So I know that someone could look at that and go, oh, that's the most important thing. I'm also pretty judicious with my use of like bolds and italics and underlines, which I know sounds minor, but it's like if I have 5 seconds or less than that for someone to get the main point of this message, what's the most important thing? So I usually put in something like, this will break everything, and I bold that, so that way I know that they'll read everything around it. the squinting method actually has helped a lot for me. Other times there's an app called Hemingway. You can put text into it and it will tell you how complex it is. I always try to drive my, what's that, Fisher-Kincaid score or whatever. It assigns a grade level to the level of writing you use. I always just try to drive that down to at least an 8th grade level. That's been pretty helpful for me too. And it helps spot the massive sentences that I'll craft and little things like that. It's not perfect, but it certainly gets me there.
Thank you. Heather?
My biggest challenge is my mood can come through my writing. So if I am on the 20th email for the day and I had to deal with a particular person who vexes me greatly, my tone can come out very crisp and curt. And the way that I fix that is I write out the email, I write out my thoughts, and I walk away. I go grab a snack, go get a glass of water, coffee, tea, something. Take a second to just breathe, break from work, go back to it, reread it. And then I can probably pull out, oh, that word is that connotation from that word is a little much. Okay, we're going to switch it. We'll change all this out. Do my own self-editing. And as I've taken a bunch of classes now, that has helped me like do better at all of that, making sure that I have sentences. So now, as I was talking to my husband last night, he was typing things out and I was editing it as he wrote. And he's just like, stop it. Can I write the paragraph? I'm like, no, it already bugs me. I already need to fix it. But yeah, so just have someone that you trust sometimes, if you can, to help you learn, and be open to criticism. Like if you're writing a story, someone else needs to look at it. You do need to show your baby to somebody else. Your mom, someone you trust, someone, who will give you. My mom took grammar. My mom was one of my hardest critics. She would write red pen all over my papers before I turned them in. So I was lucky in that way, but I was also one of those things where I give something to my mother and she's going to lay it all out there for me. And I know to expect that. But yeah, take a break, walk away from it, figure out where you are mentally, and just keep trying, keep learning. There's tons of resources online now. There's a bunch of my colleagues who have written blog posts on how to get better, self-editing books like that you can get, all these different little things that are able to help you get better. And so as long as you try, you will get better. And now I know if I read my high school stuff, I'll just cringe, despite the fact that some of that was published. I will cringe, cry, and probably try to burn it, just because I am so much better now and I'm a different person. Every year you change. You may not feel it, but you do, and you get better at something. You are making progress.
We don't even have enough time to come anywhere near talking about the things that I've needed to fix over time. I actually have a mild form of dyslexia, and it mostly manifests around numbers, but it also makes me a whole word reader. So when you talk about, picking up typos, it's just never ever going to happen for me. It's not a skill that I can hone. So I know that I need to be aware of that. And I do have good relationships. It helps if you marry well, because I do have my wife as my first reader on all of my books. But I have relationships with editors. I have relationships with proofreaders. All of my books go to my substantive editor first, and we have instituted a mandatory 3-day waiting period before we respond to those comments, because it's sometimes just as dangerous as buying a firearm. And at one point, I came home. She actually lives in the same town as me now. I came home and she was in my driveway, and I was like, hey, what's the matter? And she's like, give me a hug. I just need a hug. And I was like, okay. And I gave her a hug, and she's like, your editor in your inbox. I'll see you next week. And just bolted. but that's part of it, right? That's part of it, having those hard conversations. I do use a tool called Writer's Diet. I'm so fascinated. I took notes to look up the Hemingway app, because I'm like more of the Virginia Woolf app. Like I have like sentences that go on for paragraphs. So I do use the Writer's Diet, which helps, but it's, being a writer is making choices. So you can't ever let a machine make your choices for you. But anything that can help you be aware of the choices you need to make is fantastic. I always tell young writers that you have to write for yourself and then edit for your audience. Because I think that if you get too fixated on your audience in the early stage, it's just going to handcuff you in some really ways that stymie your creativity. But if you don't at some point make serious professional consideration for your audience, you're just writing a journal. And there's nothing wrong with writing a journal, but no one is going to pay to read your journal. So you need to find a balance between the two of them. So do your first draft, get your feels out, go ahead, hammer on the keyboard if you need to, but understand that that is just the first step in the process. You need to surround yourself with people who make you better. One last thing I will say is that you want to be with people who are interested in making you better and who are securely on your team, because so many times people use these sorts of interactions as a performance space and they let their own ego get into that, and it's not helpful. It's not good for the work. It's not good for your sanity. I know that my editor loves my books and loves my characters every bit as much as I do. She takes pride in them. She takes pride in getting to know them. And the people that I edit, these become like my godchildren. If they're her baby, they're my godchildren. And when we enter these conversations, we are coming from a place where the ego is set aside in service of the work. So that's extremely important. Don't go to people and say, rip it to shreds, be my worst critic. I have enough critics. They're all over the internet. I need someone here who's a teammate.
Great, thank you. So we are wrapping up the session today. So I think I want to ask one last question. If you pose the question in the chat, do not worry. What Dr. Nugent is going to do is take down who asked what question, and we are going to pass that along to the panelists, and hopefully they can respond to your question via email. I think that would be really great. So for our last question, and in these last 4 minutes, it's a big one, but this is to this was originally to Heather, but I think it applies to everyone. So I would love all the panelists to talk a little bit, given that with writing, there's this sort of conflict between our creativity and our sort of technical aspect in our profession. So here was a question. So I'm about to graduate this coming May, and I had considered a technical editing career or a literary editing career for a small publishing house. In your opinion, is taking the more technical path expected to drain one's creative capabilities? Would you recommend one path over the other to someone interested in both? So like I said, I would love to hear all panelists share a little bit about this, because I think all three panelists have talked a little bit about this struggle between their creativity and then their sort of profession. So yeah, RJ, do you want to start this off?
Well, in my experience, the limitations that I have when I am doing the more technical writing inspire a lot of creativity. I have to really pause and think about the best way to get through to somebody, but within this, like this genre, like Rachel was talking about. And so to me, I see a lot of creative applications there. Also, I think there's an assumption that all forms of technical communication have to be very dry, and I do not think that is the case. There's like a really good technical documentation for a programming language called Wise Poignant Guide to Ruby, and it's a comic with a talking cat explaining this programming language called Ruby, and it gets these wonderful points across, and you can learn a lot from it. Don't learn the Ruby programming language if you're interested in it, but anyway, it's tremendously creative, but it's also technical. And so today, when I'm explaining credit card processing to somebody and I'm using analogies and things like that, to me, that's a creative thing to do as well. And because the goal is ultimately, am I getting my message across to the person who needs to read it? Now, I might not use that kind of analogy up on our website. I might do something a little more formal there, but an interdepartment email, it's a great place to use it.
Okay, so best way to explain it. So I am in my 5th year as a technical editor for my company. I am the only technical editor for my brand in the US. And this past year, my workload went from publishing between around 300, 330 bulletins in a single year to 550. That is because of legal agreements. That is because we're getting more, a bunch of different things. But I am the only one who does my job. And now, doing this in the middle of a pandemic where I'm not able to reach out to, and I'm the only editor. I have one counterpart and he does a different brand and he published 100 to my 550. So the workload was insane. And that contributed to my need to move. I was perfectly content with doing both. I would have my little editing company where I would do all of my passion projects, all of the things that make my heart beat fast and make me want to scream, cry, and throw my computer across, the room because the character did something that I told it not to do 50 pages ago. And we knew this was going to happen. But I moved it up because I also know the corporate industry. I know my company. I know that unless I break, unless my work ethic breaks, and it's been to the point where my husband has shaken me and said, you need to stop working 60-hour weeks. You're getting paid for 40. We just had this conversation 3 weeks ago again because I forgot. So that's why it's a little close. He says it's killing you. They're not paying you what you're worth. And you love it. I love my boss. I have engineers who actually respect me as one of the only women in our group. And I am younger than all of them. They actually respect me. My boss respects me. He takes me seriously. If I sit down and have a conversation, says there's a problem, I have the best space to grow. But I also know that I need another one of me. And because the pandemic cut every single profit margin, there's not going to be a second of me. And I'm already at my breaking point. I already see, and my business is taking off. So there is this huge point of where, oh my gosh, I have so many projects that I literally cannot talk about because I'm under an NDA with one of the things that I'm so excited about. And I'm going to be able to post about them on social media soon. And I can't talk about any of them, but I want to do that. I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I want to be a DM. I want to create materials. This is what I love to do. And I'm not afraid anymore. And so you can pick the technical, if you are interested in technical editing, it will pay well if you get into the right space. It is one of the highest paying jobs that you can get. And I can tell you that if you decide to go freelance, medical technical editing, top dollar. And I can also tell you that if the literacy agency is where you really want to go, it's where your heart is, do that. Do what you're passionate about. You need to be happy to wake up in the morning to go to your table, because you're going to spend 70% of your day working. Do what makes you happy. And don't forget, you don't have to stay in that position. You don't have to stay in that company. You can change. I'm going from technical editing to my passion, the thing that I grew up loving. One day I may be, on Wizards of the Coast or Paizo. Actually, I did do a Paizo supplement last year, and I got books. I was sent books, guys, from Paizo on stuff that I edited. You know, someday I might be one of those source writers or source editors that they call out on Twitter and social media saying, these are all of our contributors who did this. Do what makes you happy. Know that you can still change. Know that your path is not set in stone when you graduate. You can open more than one parachute. Life is a journey. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Heather. And we're a little bit over, but I want to give Rachel the last word. And
I don't have a lot to add to that. I think, you know, I would just say you need to break that binary, that the binary between technical and creative editing or technical and creative writing, that it's not the world we live in anymore. I'm not sure that it's ever the world we lived in, but it's not the world that we're in right now. I think that you can definitely find ways to pay your rent and write your passion at the same time, and it's probably going to involve a bit of both. So don't limit yourself by thinking that these two things exist on separate planes, because they don't. Every author I know had a day job when they started writing. Every editor that I know had a day job when they started editing. So if you need to do the technical writing to keep yourself current, to keep yourself active in a field, to freelance, to pay your bills, there's no reason that that needs to kill your creative drive. In fact, a lot of people, I just last week said writing on Saturdays feels like summer school. And one of the women who writes for a different publisher said she works as a nurse, and during the pandemic she said writing on Saturday feels like I can finally breathe again. You know, so I think that it all depends on how you construct this. You get to decide these things for yourself. Don't limit yourself to one type of writing or one type of editing, because if you're doing it well, it'll carry over.
great. RJ, Rachel, Heather, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the audience for being here. Hopefully everyone learned something today, but thank you again for everyone who came, and